I've always been of the opinion that Pokemon aesthetically peaked when 2D sprites were used. I don't think it's an unpopular opinion to have, especially for longtime fans of the series, but there's just a certain charm to the older games that I feel hasn't been replicated to the same degree. Now, that's not to say that Pokemon can't work in 3D. I believe that the 3DS games look perfectly fine, but when Pokemon moved to the Switch, I feel that console leap really hasn't happened yet, and improvement since then has either been incremental or debatably even worse. I'm still okay with more 3D games. In fact, one of my 2 dream games is one that uses 3D models, but I wouldn't be opposed at all if Pokemon went back to 2D sprites. But if I'm such a fan of 2D sprites, shouldn't I familiarize myself with the older games to see how far they've come? Well, that's what I'm gonna do. I will be looking back at the oldest sprites that Pokemon has ever made, which debuted in Pokemon Red and Green. These were the first ever Pokemon games released in Japan on February 27th, 1996, and were the first time the original 151 were depicted. I'm not going to go over each and every sprite since that would take a long time, and some of them do their job well enough to where I have nothing to say about them, but if we're going to get started, we of course have to begin with Bulbasaur. Don't you love Game Boy pixel art? There's an unrefinedness to it that makes me love it so much. Anyways, Bulbasaur's design really hasn't changed that much. I mean, it's obviously hard to improve on perfection, but one notable difference is that the teeth are coming out from the bottom, similar to Snubbull. Later designs would have them come out from the top of the mouth, which I think was a change for the better. Ivysaur is probably the best one out of the 3. My only problem is that the back legs look the same size as the ones in front, which doesn't really make that much sense, but it's still a good sprite overall. Venusaur is probably my least favorite out of the 3 with more weird perspective issues. Venusaur usually has a hump on its back to prop up the flower, but here its body seems pretty sunken in. And the flower here seems to be hanging down since the leaf is drawn in front of it, and it kinda looks like it's coming out of the petal. Charmander has this weird snub nose that's also present on Charmeleon. Straight up looks like the liquefy tool was used on it. Charizard fixes it, but it's still one of its least threatening appearances. Comparing it to the box art, I can see some kid being really disappointed by it, but it's one I'm okay with personally. The Squirtle line is the one that got the most love, undoubtedly the best of the 3 starters. Squirtle looks like it's going in for a hug, Wartortle being sure of himself and ready for battle, and Blastoise looking stern and powerful. Definitely some of the best sprites in the game. From the beginning of the Pokédex to the end, we have Mew. Probably the most well-known red and green sprite for how ugly it is. Most people hate it, but I've actually never had a problem with it. I mean, I don't think it looks great, and I'll take any other sprite over it, but saying it's repulsive would be stretching it for me. Mewtwo, on the other hand, looks fantastic. Something you'll see in red and green sprites are how usually menacing Pokemon are drawn in a more cute chibi style. Mewtwo is an example of this, but even then I think it's one of the better drawn sprites in the game. Some more examples of this chibi style are Sandslash, Nidoqueen, Nidoking, Poliwrath, Machamp, Golem, Marowak, Rhydon, and Kangaskhan. Their official art would show them to be much more fierce, and even some of their pre-evolutions would have more serious looks to them. But if we're going to talk about pre-evolutions looking cooler than their finals, then I have to bring up Abra. Sure, Abra has always had its eyes closed, but here he looks downright devious. The way his arms are crossed is seriously giving me some edgy teenage angst, and I'm all here for it. It makes me wish for a regional variant of Abra that's psychic and dark type. That would be pretty cool. The rest of the line looks fine. Kadabra is serviceable, but Alakazam's head seems really big for some reason. I mean, it's almost covering his entire body. Gastly in red and green is very gassy. His body is more of a mist than an orb it would later become. Gengar is also a lot more rotund in this version. I will say that the shading looks great on him, and he does fare a bit better than some of the other sprites. But you may have noticed I skipped over his middle evolution, and that's because it might possibly be the best sprite in the game. Haunter is genuinely perfect. It's a bonus that it's my favorite out of the Gengar line, but I think objectively it has the best sprite of the 3. Its left hand reaching out to you with a sinister smile and eyes looking directly at you. It's my favorite rendition ever of Haunter in the series. Let's stick with the poison theme and look at Ekans. For a snake, it sure is missing a lot of teeth, and it's even weirder when you remember that one of the very few moves it gets is Bite. Arbok's chest design is much more pronounced here, with the actual face being a lot smaller and less menacing. Arbok's another Pokemon I really like from Gen 1, and I'm kinda sad to see it fall by the wayside. Pikachu famously was a lot fatter in the original games, with the yellow spot on its chest being different from the rest of its body. Not really an unpopular opinion to say that you prefer this over the new one, but what can I say? He's just a nice fellow with a yellow bellow. While I don't have as much detail for these next sprites, here are some rapid-fire designs I also enjoy. Clefable's red and green sprite might be my favorite of all Clefable appearances. It's well posed, and this was before fairy typing made it annoying. Parasect has that similar vibe to Haunter, where its appearance here is much more sinister than in later games. Maybe it's because its face is more obscured, but the eyes are still glowing from underneath. Also, did you know that in Gen 1, Poison was super effective against bug types? So Paris and Parasect had a 4 times weakness to Fire, Flying, and Poison? What an awful Pokemon. Tentacool and Tentacruel are both shrugging like they're indifferent to the situation. Onix is just a good looking sprite overall. Hitmonlee's clumsiness adds some personality to what is usually just a standard fighter Pokemon. Coughing and Wheezing have really good poison surrounding them, and since there were color limitations, they had purple gas instead of the yellowish ones they do now. I'm gonna sound crazy for this one, but Staryu looks like a discontinued mid-2000s food item. Maybe like a cinnamon cereal or a cheese star in a snack mix. I just get that vibe from him. Mr. Mime has this really cool detail where he's pretending to be behind a wall, which explains the flat hands, but he's also pouting his cheek to sell the illusion even further. Magmar is willing to talk it out before actually fighting. Magikarp and Gyarados look incredible here with the same perspective being used on both of them. Ditto is Ditto. Aerodactyl looks sick, and the Dragonite line looks like they're just having a good time. So far, I've mostly talked about sprites I liked, but for as many well-made sprites there are here, there are also some that look pretty rough as well. Jigglypuff and Wigglytuff had the same problem of their eyes being different sizes. For a Pokemon that is really popular due to its simple but cute design, it's crazy how bad they messed it up here. Arcanine's sprite is really busy, especially in the legs area. I'm not sure if it's just me, but it looks like there's one extra appendage in the front because of the way this part bends. Drowsy and Hypno look very humanoid in their first appearance. Hypno especially straight up looks like an old man with a big nose. Hitmonchan is well known for having a weird sprite, where fans even joke that it looks like a Doduo pooping while Togekiss is watching. Eevee for some reason looks really mad in red and green. Maybe it knew how popular it was going to get and was just awaiting the inevitable. It's weird since the other evolutions look pretty good and match their personality well. And then, ending things off, we have Moltres. The wings are fine, but the face looks so weird. The eye is halfway open and covers most of the face. If you remove the beak, it looks like some sort of SpaghettiOs spoon. I'll say for the first ever appearance of the original 151, it overall wasn't that bad. There were duds, of course, but there were also some that aged amazingly. Of course, Pokemon Red and Blue would come out updating all the sprites, with Pokemon Yellow finalizing the designs and solidifying how they would look from now on. It's pretty amazing to see the improvement of sprite work in such a short time span of 2 years. While I would love to see rapid improvement like that for 3D games, I do understand that 3D models have a whole new set of problems that need to be worked out. And while I still have a tiny sliver of hope that my dream Pokemon game can be made, I can also look back at what's worked before since the series first began. That's all I have to say for this video. Thank you all for watching, and take care.
Yeah, you could be bald and have a big nose.